Yo, what's up guys, it's TOMMYNUTTER and today we're going to talk about loudness levels on different streaming platforms. Let's get into it. Loudness in streaming is one of the hottest topics right now amongst artists and producers everywhere. In an age where the loudness war very much still exists, the major players in the world of streaming media have decided to put an end to the competition once and for all. And I call it competition for a reason. To us humans, loud is always better. And with the majority of artists wanting to sound the loudest, particularly in the EDM community, the job of the mastering engineer just got a little more complicated. In this video I'll explain to you the differences between the streaming services, how to keep your mixes from automatically getting turned down in volume, and how to go about integrating loudness into your mix from the very start. First we need to understand a few simple concepts. In this example, the unmastered mix typically hits -7 to -5 dB. And it has the most dynamics, which is the distance between its loudest and quietest parts. And it also has the least compression. We can make out the kick and the snare hits as the tallest peaks, and we can also see plenty of headroom left, denoted by the space left above the peaks. When we master it, we often use some compression to reduce those peaks whilst trying to improve the sound. Compressing means that the peaks are lower and the troughs are higher because of the squeezing action of the compressor. Now that the peaks and troughs are closer to each other, when we increase the level, we bring up every part of the song together, giving more overall loudness. The next example is a good master, which fits within the suggested levels for the new streaming loudness guidelines. You can see it still has a lot of dynamics. We will come back to this one shortly. This is the same file, but with more compression. The compression has obviously taken away some of our dynamics, but it also allows us to increase the overall level as we've gained some headroom by compressing. This will be much louder in volume, but will also be lower in quality because of the amount of compression added. In our final example, this is the same file again, but this time we've used a limiter instead of a compressor. We've taken our good master and put a limiter on to clip any peaks that go louder than our threshold. Whilst this brings up the volume of the song, it also destroys some of the information in the highest peaks as they get clipped off. This can introduce distortion, which gives the effect of sounding louder, but is also mostly unwanted. Using a limiter means we can push the level up without fear of going into the red, but that's only because what is going past the red is being cut off. Limiting does have its place. Let's go back to our good master example. It is dynamic, loud and punchy, and on the waveform you can see it has some space left around the peaks. This is because I've set my limiter to -0.2 dB. Most digital music players will have a limiter of -0.1 dB, whilst if you were to take that same file and play it on a CD player, you'd get clipping. That's because most CD players have an internal limiter of -0.2 dB. This point serves to illustrate that different equipment has different headroom. We'll talk more about this later and why Apple is especially vigilant about this. The purpose of these examples is to show you that you can get a song as loud as you want, but it will always sacrifice quality for volume. On that note, we can see that the new loudness levels set by the streaming platforms have only one goal in mind, and that's music quality. The system they've introduced is a very clever one. They use a unit of loudness called LUFS, or loudness units full scale. There are many meters which read in LUFS, but my favourite one is a WLM meter from Waves. It's currently on sale for $59 and it may be something worth investing in. LUFS differs from RMS and peak in that it takes the average reading of a perceived loudness over the course of an entire song. Because of this, if you were to upload a song to Spotify for example, and that song had been slammed into the limiter and you'd got the kicks extremely loud and you had some distortion on the synths but you really liked the sound of it, Spotify's level meters would detect this loudness and the lack of dynamics and the apparent clipping of the waveform, and it'd turn it down in volume for the listener until its perceived loudness was equal to everything else in their catalogue, including older, quieter songs, which incidentally may have been increased in volumes by Spotify themselves to meet these new standards. The aim of the system is to be able to log in and listen to anything from Beethoven to David Guetta and have it all sound in the same volume. If we were to upload the good master from our earlier examples, it would be played on Spotify as it is right now, as it meets Spotify's guidelines of -14 LUFS. Similarly, Apple have a formal system called Mastering for iTunes, in which they send out guidelines to mastering engineers and they can submit their songs that follow these guidelines, earning them the Mastered for iTunes endorsement. Apple's rules are a little stricter but serve only to maintain the quality of the music even further. They focus on maintaining bit depth and sample rate, meaning that whatever format the song is exported in should be the same bit depth and sample rate as the unmastered stems throughout the duration of the project. They also focus heavily on codec use, avoiding intermingling of things like MP3 and WAV and use of the AAC codec. They use loudness normalization the same as Spotify and Pandora, aiming for the -14 LUFS standard. And lastly, they try to moderate the intersample clipping, which is basically when two adjacent samples that are limited end up producing a louder momentary sample, which clips when translated to analog equipment. Apple have a free Mastering for iTunes download, which contains a plugin that helps you detect any clipping and simulate the conversion to AAC to test before uploading. It's all very confusing. In fact, I got a question just this week asking could I do a video on how to make beats louder on different platforms. Well, for YouTube, who currently aren't using loudness normalization, there'll be no change. The loudness war is still effectively ongoing. You can limit to your heart's content and get super loud, obnoxious sounding tracks. But wait, let's think about the whole concept, the whole idea, the whole aim to improve music quality for everyone. After all, if you're on YouTube listening to something and it's too quiet, can't you just turn up your speakers? The loudness war problem wouldn't exist if people weren't comparing a song to a different song, and this is why Spotify and other streaming platforms got it right with the loudness normalization method. I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's always going to be competition, but I'm urging you to concentrate on having a good quality, dynamic mix that sounds good and has plenty of movement and motion. The more you work on getting this right, the faster you'll become great at mixing, and the quicker you'll understand the concepts behind limiting and compression so that you can use them to your advantage. I'm now going to give you a quick example of how I go about ensuring that my mixes maintain the dynamics whilst being loud and punchy, but within the guidelines set by Spotify. We'll be using FL Studio as it's the most common DAW my subscribers use. We'll also be using WLM Meter Plus from Waves. Back in the studio, and what I've got here for you is the project file that we did the other day about how to mix kick and bass. We're going to work on that project again because that's got some of the elements in it that we're going to talk about. So if you remember, it was just a simple loop. It was a kick, a snare, hi-hat. We had a melody loop and we had the sub bass 808 going on. Now we talked before about how to get loudness in the mix. If you've not watched that video, by the way, go back and watch it now. You'll need to know what we did, but I'll go over it in brief here. You couldn't hear the 808 and you couldn't hear the kick punching through, and I showed you how to resolve that by using saturation and by using sidechain compression. That's one of the techniques that's going to keep that mix nice and loud for you. So what we did was we created a channel with a distortion plugin on it to saturate the sub bass, and we sent it to that, and then we balanced the level between them both by using the fader. And also what we did was we sent the kick into the sub bass into a limiter, which sidechained the sub bass out of the way every time the kick hit. So that keeps it nice and loud. It keeps the kick and bass from firing together and using up all that headroom. So a good point for loudness in the mix is conserve your headroom. The other thing we did was we took away the lowest frequencies that you couldn't even hear of the kick and the bass, and that also saved us a lot more headroom. At the minute, it's sounding like this. And it's hitting -6 dB on the master. We've got it sounding exactly the way we want it to. We've used saturation to bring out the ability to hear the lower frequencies that we couldn't hear before. It's still nice and punchy. It hits hard in the chest. That snare's slapping. I'm going to show you a couple more techniques now that you can use to make things sound louder and bigger. So here's a technique that you've probably already used before, but what I've done is I've set up another channel here, and we're just going to change the colour and rename this too. And that one is a little reverb. I've panned the reverb to the right hand side because I've got the hi-hat and the snare panned slightly to the left. So because they're mono channels, it works by sending that hi-hat, which is panned left, sending it into a reverb, which is panned right, and it just creates a little more space for that hi-hat. So it seems like it's coming from the centre, but that it's filling the room space. I also did it with the snare a little bit. So the snare really is on the left, but it's hitting that reverb on the right, so it sounds like it's giving it space. And space means loudness. The melody, I've also sent a little bit to the reverb. Now let's listen to those three items without the reverb on. Sounds kind of flat now. Sounds like that snare's not going anywhere, like it's not loud enough to fill up that space. But give it some space and it fills it, and it makes you think, oh, it's loud. So if you remember yesterday, the thing that we did to the kick, after we did the side chaining, we added a little more 7K, and that brought up the click of the kick, and that made it louder without doing much else. Listen to it without. It's there, but it's not very present. And now with it on, it's got that high, that pop. And our sub bass that we saturated. This is without. The level's exactly the same, but it doesn't seem as loud. But now we saturate it, and it seems louder, but the level's the same. And we haven't used any compression on that. That's just EQ and a saturation plugin. So those kinds of tips are what's going to take your mix from being a normal untreated sample of a kick or whatever. Just add in those little embellishments, saturation, reverb, EQing in specific strategically planned places. Just think what you do need and what you don't need, and what it's lacking and what you can add. Now let's take a look at our master channel. So our mix is finished, our items are all mixed together, they're interacting with each other just the way we want them. But now we've got our mix buzz processing, which is going to be a compressor at a 2:1 ratio, and we want about 4 dB of gain reduction on our mix buzz. And it's confusing because in FL Studio the mix buzz and the master buzz are the same thing, but in everything else you'll have a mix buzz and then you'll render that down and do a separate mastering. So we've turned on a compressor, and let's just set it up so that we get in 4 dB of gain reduction. Perfect. Now the needle there, when the kick and the 808's hitting, the point of the peak being highest, where the volume and the impact is the highest, is immediately when that kick hits and the first few milliseconds of that 808 hitting as well. As the 808 fades away after that, the volume also fades away, the level fades away. So that compressor should no longer be engaged. If it was engaged, it'd be clamping down on the sound, taking away some of the loudness. I'm going to show you how that works now. So this is how it should be. The needle dying away straight away after the loudest part. You can see there. Now watch what happens when we turn up the release so that that compressor stays clamped down for longer. It seems quieter, it seems like it's being held back, because it is. It's being compressed for a longer period of time. So this is another important point. On your mix buzz, if you're going to be putting compression on your mix buzz, which I do every time, some people call it mix glue, some people call it gluing together the mix. It's just a light compression that solidifies everything on your mix buzz. If you're going to be doing this, you want to get your timing right. If we were to have too fast of an attack, then that compressor would be clamping down on that kick before it's had a chance to make an impact. If we had too fast of a release, then it'd hardly be doing any compressing. It wouldn't be doing the thing that we want it to tame those peaks. If we had too slow of a release, it'd be clamping down on it too much and it wouldn't let go fast enough, like I just showed you. So let's do that now. We'll take it back. And you can see how that, you can hear how that instantly got more impact and, you guessed it, more loudness. So the other thing the next tip to remember from loudness in the mix is get your mix buzz compressor attacking and releasing right, so that you're not ruining your mix up to now. You're not taking anything away from it. You're letting everything get through that you want to. So now we've got that done and we've matched our output so that it's not doing any gain or so it's not adding any level or taking any away. Let's check it. This is without. So we need to turn it down a little bit, get it back to 6 like it was. Okay, so our master buzz is reading -6 again, meaning we've not added any level by using that compressor. We're now on to the mastering stage. So we'll use our mastering plugin, which in this case I'm using the Ozone 7 Maximizer. Now, normally I do more mastering than this. I go in and do all sorts of things, but for this example we're just going to use the Maximizer, which is basically a limiter, same thing as Maximus in FL Studio. So I've set my ceiling should be at -0.2 dB. If you're doing it for a CD or anything like that, you'll want it at least -0.2 dB, because that's how they limit. If you're doing it just for YouTube or streaming, you can do it to -0.1. I've got it set as a transparent limiter. That'll be an option on a lot of other limiters you use as well, transparency, meaning that it doesn't really colour it much. It doesn't add its own unique sound to it. It just does the job of the limiting that it wants to. So what we're going to do now with this limiter is we're going to bring down our threshold until we're happy at a point where it sounds loud enough, and I usually set it at -9.5 for a start, and then we can start checking. So let's check it now. Okay, so it still sounds the same, but louder, obviously. And this is the secret weapon. This is what's going to help you keep those LUFS measurements in check. WLM Plus Stereo from Waves. What this plugin does is it reads the average perceived loudness over the course of the entire song. That's going to be a bit hard to do because we're only using a loop, but it'll illustrate the point anyway. I've got my own preset on this, and this preset is using the LUFS 9dB scale. My target's -14 because we want it for Spotify. True peak is the same thing as your limiter is set at, -0.2. You got a short main and a short max. I left those as they were. This is the short term, so this will show you the loudness at that given moment. And the long term, like I said, it's an average over the entire song. So what you do is you listen to your song the entire way through. And this little thing here tells you what you need to adjust it by in order to get it to fit to the standard that you've given it. So let's take a listen now. Okay, so we're too loud. We've got a red, that means we're over. Long term we're on -12, which is too many. And it's telling us that to get it in the right area, we can turn it down by -2.5. If I press that, it will turn it down by -2.5, but it'll do it in this plugin. It won't change our faders or anything like that. It'll just take 2.5 of dB away. We don't want to do that because I'd rather get it right, first of all. Now, the last thing that we did to increase the level is the next thing that we want to change to remedy this situation. So if we go back to our maximizer and we take a little bit of that threshold up again, we'll take it to 9. And then we'll reset this and check it again. Okay, we're still hitting 12. We're getting some short-term peaks that are in the right ballpark. We'll go back and turn it down again. We'll reduce this limiting. And we'll reset this and check again. It's getting there. We're coming up with those ticks, so we're nearly at -14. It's telling us in the trim that we only need to turn it down now by -0.6. So let's go to 6.7 and let's try again. We'll reset that. Perfect. And that's how you get to -14 LUFS. Now you might be thinking, but you seemed even louder like a moment ago before you turned that limiter back down. Well, yeah, that's the point. The point is, it was too loud. It was louder than some other ones on Spotify might be. So what's the point of risking getting it turned down? You want to get to a point where it fits within the guidelines, and then you know that it's not going to get turned down. So guys, if you've got this far to the end of the video, it means that you're putting in the effort to really learn how to mix and master properly, and I commend you for that, and I wish you all the luck in the world. But if you've got any problems or you need to know anything, have you got any issues with your mix, I'd really like to make videos that help you guys out specifically. So please leave a comment below, let me know what you guys want to know, any ideas for videos or anything like that. And if you've not seen my previous videos, go back and watch those now. I've got plenty of beats coming out each week, tutorials, and also some rather nice blogs on my website that you can go and have a read of, www.ITSTOMMYNUTTER.com. If you want mixing and mastering, check out my Fiverr profile for great deals on heavily discounted prices. And that's about it for today. Don't forget to subscribe and like and hit that notification bell if you will, it helps a great deal. Thanks, peace, bye.